Hello, Natroners, and welcome back to another episode of VFX with Natron. So today we're going to be looking at working on extending our previous episode on making a laser logo effect. We're going to add some fonts to it, but we're going to do something interesting with the fonts. What we're going to do is we're going to blend the text in a way that makes it look like all the text, all the outlines sort of merge together so that the fonts all get sort of conglomerate into one big mass in the middle. And I'm going to go over how to do that. But first, we're going to look at a few things. First thing we need to do is look at what the goal of today is going to be. So today's goal is going to be this. And of course, this means that we're going to need a font, and the font that we're going to be using is called Digital Surf. The link is in the description for both YouTube and for Facebook. This is what Digital Surf looks like. And with that said, let's pop into Natron. And so here we are in Natron. This is what we had last time. What we're going to do before we move forward is we want to fix one little bitty glitch that we had, or one thing that I wasn't overly crazy after rendering it out. One of the things we want to do, I didn't like how our grunge was like eating into the logo. I felt it was too hard after watching it play back. And by the way, what you saw was the actual modified version after I did some modification to it. So I fixed it. Anyway, so this branch here with the SE noise that comes down through the gradient and the clamp over here to this merge number 5. If we pull up merge number 5, but right now it's set to 1. All we're going to do is change this number 1 to a 0.5, and that is going to drop the grunge level, and you can see it just lessens it a lot, and it still won't feel as so intense in the dark areas, and it will look a little more natural and realistic looking. Anyway, now that that's done, we're going to go back up to the top here, and what we're going to do is right here after this merge node where the logo comes in, we need to do a few things. First thing we need to do is we need to create, we're going to be offsetting the logo to make room for for the font to stretch out, or it's going to be stretching out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the beginning of our animation. We're going to change our frame range. If you're picking up and you're still working with the original file from last week, you may already have this preset, but we're going to change this 10 frame skipping to 24. That's 1 second. Whatever you're using, you just make it 1 second. We're going to be skipping out to, we ended at frame 73. We're going to go 1 second of the logo staying still, which brings us out to frame 97. And at frame 97, we're going to be moving the logo and ultimately the fonts with it, so that they off to the side. And we're gonna see something that's going to happen here in a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a merge node, I believe. Yes, we're going to put a merge node first. What the merge node is going to be for, this merge node is where our fonts are going to come in. I don't want it to be part of this other group that makes up our logo. And then after the merge node, what we're going to do, let's actually move that up a little bit because I want just a smidge more room, because we're going to also put a transform node. Now this transform node here is going to be what we're actually going to be transforming the logo from its current position at frame 97 over to its final position at frame 1, I think it's going to be 21 or 120, I think it's 121. Anyway, so right, let's first do our transformation. So at frame 97, we're going to set a key on the x-axis. It doesn't matter. You can do it on either the x or on the x and y. It's up to you. And that's all we have to do is set it to 0, because that's where we're going to start. And then we're going to skip to frame 121, which is 1 second away. And at 121, we're going to see that what we're going to want to do is offset this to the left to -61.5. And don't ask me why I did the 5. For some reason at the time I thought that 5 looked good, and ended up with the overall thing moving over. Another thing we're going to do to speed this up a little bit is we're going to just bypass all the blue for right now. That's all handled from this point forward, so we don't have to worry. So we're going to just look at this like this, and that way we can just focus on what our lines and everything look like. All right, so this is what it looks like here as far as the position. But we also need this if we were to animate this. Actually, let's set up our first frame because we don't want to render out everything before it and after it all the time. So what we're going to do is set our start location for looping to 95, and then our end frame is going to be 125. All right, so that just gives us a little bit after and a little bit before, and we're also, for the time being, we're going to just drop this down to 4. For our resolution, so that we can just watch how things work. So right now, if we just were to play this from the beginning to the end, it's a linear motion, and it's really jerky, and it just sort of starts and stops. So we want to go in to a curve editor, and we want to select this curve, which is our X on our curve. We want to select the 2 points that make it up. Right click. I'm going to move that over so it doesn't appear behind my face. Going to go to the interpolation, and I'm going to hit linear, or excuse me, I'm going to switch it from linear to horizontal interpolation, and we can see that that puts a nice little S curve. And now if we hit play, we can see it speeds up and slows down, and that looks a lot better. That will make it ease a bit. And I just want to make sure my video is working and it's looking good. And Mr. Thomas Morley, thank you. I do appreciate my lighting. I like my new lighting setup. Okay, so that takes care of the transform. This is the reason we're doing the transform afterwards, is because there's an important thing to understand about this. We're merging the fonts. We want the ends of when we add the 2 fonts, or the 2 lines of fonts, or of text, excuse me, not fonts, 2 lines of text in before this. We want it to line up with the edge of our logo and stay pinned there. And if we were to animate them individually, we aren't guaranteed that the distance from the edge of the logo to the Natron, the beginning of Natron and the beginning of Nation, is the same. So that's the reason we're going to be merging it here beforehand. So with that said, now we know why we're merging it and why we're doing the motion of the movement of the 2 items afterwards. All right, so now we're going to add a text node, and we put the text node in, and we'll just take it and we'll merge it in right here. And we can see our font, and it's not very good in this form. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get my settings up here. We're going to switch it obviously to digital surf, so let's scroll this down so you can all see. We're going to select our font. It's going to be, if you have the newest version of Natron, you're going to see this will appear in your fonts folder if you install it on Windows. On older ones, I cannot guarantee. If you don't, you might want to watch an older episode on how to select font and how you add it to the into Natron. Anyway, if it doesn't show up. Anyway, so our font is going to be Digital Surf, which is right here. And we can see that it says enter text. We're still going to keep it in low resolution for right now. It's good enough for evaluating this. We're going to type in Natron in caps. Excuse me. We're going to set the font size to 180. And you can see that when we do this, we'll see that it's already skewed. It's already italicized, but it's italicized in the wrong direction. We are going to be italicizing it, but we're not going to be doing it on the font itself. And this will become apparent after a few more steps, because we're actually not going to be keeping this as one whole word, and it will become apparent why in a few minutes. The first thing we need to do, however, is we do need to, the way we're going to be going about this is we're going to be adjusting this by doing line spacing, or letter spacing, excuse me, not line spacing, letter spacing. We need to give it a little more room for outlines. We're going to be turning this into an outline font. So what we're going to do is just put the letter spacing to 10. That'll give a little room around each letter for the the outlines to appear. Now we're going to position it. So let's go up to the top here. And now I'm going to do the Y positioning first, because the Y positioning is going to set up our vertical position. And just so people are aware, well, we can pull this back just so that the T is very close, and we can see, actually, let's turn this turn off our downscaling for a minute so that we can see this a little more accurately. I'm going to change this to 753. I think it is, yes, 753. And when we set that to 753, we can see it doesn't, if we push this over, I just want to push this over a little bit here. We can see that the font, the top of this T lines up, it's just below the top of our outermost outline, and the A is just a little bit above. And that, the reason for that is because when we add outlines, we want a little bit of buffer rooms, but we want it to more or less line up with the size of a logo. So we don't want to make it too big, too small. And if we move the T all the way up so that it matched up, it wouldn't look like an outline, or it would look like it's too big. So that's why we have the T set to 753. All right, and that's the reason for that. Now, some people might be wondering why we're not going to actually. You might think that we want to push this off to the side here like this. But because we are doing the skewing with a transform node, which might as well put that in right now, select our font, hit T to add a transform node. And what we're going to do is actually, for the transform node, we'll set the skew. It will become apparent the second we put the skew in. We're going to set the skew to -1. It's currently 0, -1. When we put it at -1, we can see that this font lines up pretty well with this. And we can pull this back. Oh, let's go back to our first one. Let's just look at what it looks like here. If we keep it at like 1260, this is probably good enough to see what the problem is. And we look over here to the right, we see that, our font has been cut off here on the side. And you're saying to yourself, why is it doing that? Well, the reason is because this transform node, whenever you take something that's does not have an ROD, like a text node doesn't have by default, it doesn't actually have an ROD. It has one, but it doesn't. It's weird. Anyway, as soon as you put it into a transform, the transform node will conform it to the project or the world space ROD, which happens to be 1920 by 1080. So what's happening is when we skew this backwards, because these letters were off the screen to the right, it's skewing back everything that's cut off. And so we're not seeing the entire thing. So what we actually want to do is dial this back. And where we're actually going to be putting the actual font on our font, or for our font, is we're going to put it at 570. All right. And when we do that, we can see that pushes it over so that the font is very close to the left-hand side of the screen, which means that we're going to but we get our O and our N back. And so we're going to compensate for that by changing the transform node. We're going to transform it here and set it to this one to 560. Oh, I think it's 560. No, excuse me, not 560. Sorry, wrong one. 670. There we go. And when we put it at 670, we are back, and that's actually where we want our final transform to be for the Natron. All right, so that takes care of that. Now, as I said, we're going to be animating this from our position. So we were at frame 97 is where we said that the animation starts. If we watch this at frame 97, the logo and the text is going to move. But currently, as we can see, the text will be off screen. Well, that's because we're going to be shrinking everything. It's all going to start off basically where this N is. So what we're going to do is at frame 97, make sure we're on frame 97. And on frame 97, we're going to go back into our text node, make sure we've selected our text node only, have it here. We want to set, we want to first go ahead to, we've already set it to a line spacing, or excuse me, not a line, I keep saying line, letter spacing of 10. We want to actually go out to 121 and set a key on that letter spacing at that point for where it's going to end. That's the size we want it to end at. It's a letter spacing of 10. And then when we go back 24 frames to frame 97, we're going to actually set this to minus 121. And you're going to say to yourself, why 121 per se? Well, the goal here is I want to try as much as possible in most situations to set it so that the edge of the N that is here, or that makes up the word natron, is still visible, this leftmost edge, the entire time, because that's a fixed point. If I set this from negative 121, if I take it back to negative 122, we can see that the next letter over, or another letter to the right of that letter, suddenly passes it, and that means that edge won't stay consistent. So we want the furthest we can push it before it basically one of the other letters passes by it is negative 121. So that's where we're going to start it. That's the most collapse we're going to have it. We could technically shrink this down, but then you'd have to do counter skewing and no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go into that's craziness. All right, so what do you think is going to happen at this point? Let's put back on our low resolution because we don't need it to actually evaluate this motion. When we hit play, we're going to have a problem, our first problem. Let's watch what happens. So it moves across and it's not actually unfolding. It just suddenly pops into existence. And that's because, or it pops to our final location. And that's because the letter spacing by default, if we go to our curves and fit this, we can see that the letter spacing slope is actually, it's just held. And then it just, or it's constant. So if we go here and we select the 2 points and we right click and we go to the interpolation, we can see currently what it's set to is constant, which is this top option. We're going to set it to linear interpolation to start with, and we can already see now we're starting to see the lines or the words unfold, but we're still going to have a problem. Let's take a look at it now. We're going to, if we start it off and watch it, we can see that actually, let's zoom out just a little bit more so we can evaluate it better. There we go. We can see that the letters on, particularly on this side, slow down. And the reason that they're slowing down is because the letters are, we're doing completely linear. We have this, the whole thing, the motion of the logo and the text is easing. It's easing in and easing out. Well, we don't have to worry about the ease in. That's not going to matter because that's all handled by the motion of that transform node. But at the end, the reason the end letters are not are doing this little funny shake at the end is because they're not easing out. So we're going to select just these end points, or just the end point on our slope. We're going to right click on it. We're going to go to interpolation. We're going to set that to horizontal, or from linear to horizontal, which is going to give us an easing curve. Now, when we play it, we're going to see it, and it looks a whole lot better. It almost looks right, except for this little something is funky is going on here. This side from N, A, and T, it looks pretty good. But when we get over to the RO, and particularly the O and the N, we start seeing something happen towards the end of the animation where especially with the N, it starts to look like it's jerking. And it may not be the most clear at this resolution. So let's turn it back so that it's actually at the final resolution. This might take a minute for it to render, but we'll be able to evaluate it a little bit better. We'll see just on the last few frames, it's going to look like the N sort of jumps in little bits. It jumps and then it pushes back to the left. Did you see that? So watch what happens. See how it's sort of shimmying. And the reason that it's shimmying is if we look at our slope here, what's happening is because the letter spacing is not a floating point variable, so it can't be a perfect curve. We're winding up with stair steps, and what's happening is these stair steps are actually bigger, especially this last one is bigger than the actual motion of the distance of one frame. Most of this, it's doing it in subframe increments, which makes it look like it's happening smoothly, but it's only on the last bit it starts to shimmy because they're happening, the movement is happening over a greater distance. It needs to be under 1 frame's worth of movement. So this isn't going to work in its current state. We need to do something to it. But before we do that, I want to actually add in our second line of text. So what we're going to do for the time being is we're just going to take this and we're going to copy this. We're going to copy this text over here, and we're going to merge it in with the first one. So we'll take it and we're going to do it after the transform, because we're going to actually transform this text as well. So we'll take this text, we're going to merge it, and then we'll connect it up like so. And then we see that the text is all wonky because this text is not transformed. So what we want to do here is let's actually, what we want to go, let's get out, let's reintroduce our low resolution, and we're going to go out to actually we just want to go out to 120, frame 121, 121. There we go. So we're at the end. That way we're looking at it. So with it set to 121, what we want to do is we want to set up our second set of text. Our second set of text, we're going to just select the RON and change it to RON, oops, capital RON. There we go, oops, and don't hit return. Click out, and that creates the nation. And make sure you're doing it on the second one, not the first one. And we're going to leave the letter spacing. Well, actually, we're not going to leave the letter spacing at 10. We're going to actually first position this. And I'm going to save us the trouble and tell us where we're going to be setting this. We're going to set this to, well, we're going to actually, for right now, we're going to set this to 576 on the X, which is going to push it over. But for the height, we're going to run into the same problem with the end. We'll fix it. We're going to set the height, or its position vertically, to 529. Oops, not 39, 29. There we go. So there we go. Well, this is what we have for our lower text. We're going to transform it from this point, because remember, we don't want to cut off the last letters. So we're going to add a transform node to this. And for that transform node, we want to transform it to by, whoops, wait a minute, is it 560 as well? All right, this is the one that was 560. So if we put 560 on this one, we wind up out here. Now, we can see a couple problems here. First of all, this is not skewed correctly over here. What that means is we need to actually add a little bit of skew to this. So the way we're going to skew it is we're actually going to take the X skew here, and we're going to just add 0.1 to it, I think. Maybe a little bit more. I think I actually found that last time. I liked it closer to about, oh, you know what? I'll like it at 1.4. I think that looks good. But it means that this isn't lined up correctly. We need to actually push this over a little bit more. So let's get that lined up nicely. I think let's do 566 or 5. Oh, what the heck? We'll do 566 is going to be our position for this. That looks about the same distance on both of those. Oh, wait, we're not evaluating it properly. Let's look at it like that. Yeah, that's still looking, that's looking really good. All right, so there we go. Maybe let's try 567. Just to... You know what? I think I'm going to go with 567. I'll change my mind. All right, we're going to do 567. But we need to go back to our text node, because we have a problem here. Now, there's two ways we could fix this. One way we could fix this is we could actually just scale the x-axis. That's actually what I did in my animation, but I realized that's not what I did in my very, very first one, which a lot of people may remember from way back when. I actually just, I actually made the fonts actually a further distance apart. So what we're going to actually do is on frame 121, we're going to actually bring this out another 10 pixels, and we can, or another 10, font size, letter spacings, and that pushes it pretty close. I think we want to get it so that this edge of this N and the top of this N line up a little bit better, which I think is going to take about another 2, if I remember correctly, or maybe it was just 1. I think we'll go with 1. I think it looks better there. So we'll set the letter spacing to 120 or to 21, and there we go. I think that looks like they both occupy approximately the same space. For people who get really into photography and you know, get worrying about your leading between your and your kerning and so forth, The kerning here is not very good in this font, but you know what? I think that because of this is supposed to be this old stuff, people in older days had a lot more trouble with, especially when doing special effects and so forth. A lot of times had issues getting those types of things done, especially if it was done digitally. So I thought it added a little bit of a sort of almost cheesy factor to it by letting this just remain a little bit off on this, and so we're going to just leave it be. If you want to, you can fix it, but that would mean that instead of doing your letter spacing down here, which is, by the way, kerning and letter spacing are the same thing, that's all it means. Anyway, if you can do it by turning on markup and editing it inside of the text node, but you're going to have to look up Pengo, which is the language, I think that's what it's called. Pengo is a form of markup language, and you'd have to look it up and look up how to space it, and then you'd have to set keyframes on it. Anyway, that's beyond the scope of this. We're going to go back here, and we're going to work on fixing this. So we still have the same problem, which is if we go back to the previous frame. First of all, we have a problem here, which is that our nation is going too far. It's gone way past the point where it's collapsed. This should probably be, I think it was 109 was what I ended up with. Now, 109 isn't quite right. If you look at what happens, I really think 108 would have been the perfect thing, but 108 actually turned out to be, it has this glitch in it. I don't know why it glitches here. But I actually think I like 107 better, because 107 is the last frame where I think we are not covering over the N. So we're going to actually keep it at 107 for this edge. Otherwise, at 109, we see another font is pushing past it. All right, so there we go. So we'll go back to 107, and that's that. All right, and let's just check our curve to make sure. Aha, I knew it. The second we adjust these, we wind up creating some issues. So we're going to right click, we'll select the curves for our nation. We're going to select it, set interpolation. Let's push this over so I'm not blocking it. Interpolation, we're going to set it to linear first, then select the top point, right click, or top or last point, and we're going to go to interpolation, horizontal, and let's just watch what that does. We're going to again put this on low resolution because we're just evaluating the motion at this point, and we can see we're getting that same. It's actually kind of worse on this one. You can really see the jumps of those ends at the end, which isn't so good. So how are we going to fix that? How do we fix that? Well, the way we've done this in the past is we've actually animated every single letter in the past. That's one of the ways we can get past this, because then we can do an individual motion for each individual letter. But that's a real pain in the butt, and it would be basically doing what we did here, but once for every single letter, which is a real pain, and it's really not needed in this situation. So the way we're going to get around this time is we're actually going to that we need to focus on what people are paying attention to and where does the motion break. Well, one of the nice things about this logo that we're doing is that it's broken up into a perfect 6 letters, and all the letters that are giving us problem are in the last 3, which means that for in our case of our RON, if we're focused on that, our first set of text, we only have to basically reanimate the RON. So what would make more sense is if we just duplicate this. Yes, duplicate, not clone, duplicate this. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to hit Alt-C and get to create a second one. And then I'm going to take my original one and I'm going to put a merge node here and connect the second one on top of it. Okay. And what we're going to do is set this merge node here from over to difference. And what that's going to do is it's going to say whenever there's a difference, show only things that don't match up. If they match up perfectly, it's basically if both the images match up, they're going to eliminate each other. All right, and this is going to be important in a moment, but what's going to happen is our Natron is going to disappear, just like so. All right, and that's because we have both of them say Natron, and both of them are positioned exactly the same. But we don't want that. What we want to do is on the second one, we want to actually eliminate the first three letters. This is going to only be our last three letters. Well, when we do that, we can see that now we've revealed the two, and we can see that the RON is sitting on top of the NAT because it's over here on the left. What we're going to do, what we want to do is try and fix the RON by moving a pivot point for where the skewing is happening closer to this side. And the easiest way to do that is actually to turn on center interact first, which is obviously going to shift it so that the keyframe is now over where the O is. But this also means that we need to line it up. And so what we need to do here is we need to now reposition this. And this is the reason we're using the difference. The reason we're using the difference is we have a way of looking at where that RON, where the two RONs are going to be aligned. All we have to do is move this one until it basically blacks out the other one. We could do this manually just by grabbing this and pulling it over here and sort of moving it around like that. And that's pretty close, except for we're not actually looking at it. We're looking at it at higher resolution. As soon as we actually look at it at normal resolution, we can see that that moved it. We can just sort of play around. I think just to save us all a little bit of trouble, I'm going to actually pull up the things. This is correct. 629 is correct, but this should be 1154, not 1152. So we'll just knock that up 2, and we can see, there we go. It's eliminated the other, and we wound up with perfect. All we see is NAT. Now, you might think, okay, we're good to go. We can eliminate the RON, and the other RON will appear back at the beginning. Except for we have a problem here. Watch what happens when we go back to frame 90. Excuse me. We're on frame 121 now. We're at the end. Okay, I'm going to go, I just clicked back, so we're at frame 121. When we go back to frame 97, look what happened. Our RON, our new RON, is way off over here on the right, and our old RON is collapsed over here on the left. So what that means is that we need to add a transform node here, below this, all right? And this transform node is going to be used to animate this going from this position over to that position. So first we need to go up back to the end. So we're going to go back to frame 121 where they're overlapping. We're going to take this transform node, and on the x-axis we're going to just set a key. All right, so we set a key on that x position, and then we're going to go back 24 frames here. And what we're going to do is we're going to line up this R, see this R right here. And by the way, you want to make sure you do not have low resolution sampling on when you do this. This R here, see how the R is kind of collapsed, and we're seeing the, is that right? Yes, this is going to be the R, the edge of the R. We see the edge of the R here, and we see the edge of the R, the curve of that R right there. And when we go back, so when we go back to, or when we're at frame 97, what we're going to do is we're going to just move this over until it lines up with this part of the R right there. So all we got to do is take this, and we'll just go back. I'm going to save us a little bit of trouble. I believe we go back to, okay, we should go back only negative 525, 525. And let's see, it might be right. It is not right. We're just a little bit we're a little off. So we're going to just go forward to 524. There we go. See how it eliminated it completely there. So it's negative 524 at the beginning or at the end. Now, if we watch this from the beginning to the end, we should, you know what? We're going to just zoom this out a little bit. And we're going to turn on this, the load proxy, and we're going to watch this, and we're going to see something funky is going to happen. We're seeing that the RON at the new one is actually doing something funky. It's kind of hard to evaluate because the old RON is moving at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our first text node. We're going to get rid of that RON out of it so that we can see it. And then instead of having this merge node be difference, we're going to switch it back to over. All right. So now we can watch that animation play out, and we can see, and it's doing a similar thing to what it did before. Except for this time, I just want to verify. Let me make sure on my original, do we only do it? I think we only do it at the end. I want to make sure. Yes, we only need to ease this out at the end. So, if we go to the axis, we hit fit. All we have to do is basically the same thing we did with the letters. We just need this to ease out here because it's a linear motion. That motion of that RON is not linear, or it's currently linear. We want to ease it out. So we're going to select the last point on it. We're going to right click. We're going to change the interpolation to horizontal. And now let's watch our animation from the beginning to the end. And now it's easing out. There we go. We've got a nice even motion, and it looks good. Now it matches up, and we've got Natron, and we can see it doesn't. Well, it's looking. We're also seeing the motion down here of this one stuttering, and it makes it look like this one's stuttering more than it actually is. This end is no longer stuttering. This one is, and it's creating an optical illusion, I believe. Once we fix the second one, we will not have that problem again. So what we're going to do is just copy this one over here, and we're obviously going to need a merge node. So what I'm going to do for right now, just because this is all getting claustrophobic in here, we're going to just pull this down. Oops, we're going to move these up here, pull this merge node down a little bit, so we have room to work with. I'm going to pull this transform down here, keep this transform over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a merge node here, and we're going to connect it up to that. All right, just like that. All right, and so actually we're going to move this merge node up here so that it goes into the other merge node nice and even, get it nice looking. Maybe move these up a little bit because I think we can. There we go. That looks just a little bit cleaner. All right. So again, we want to change this merge node to difference. So we go here, change it to difference, eliminates it. Then we want to change the text, get rid of the NAT at the beginning. Whoops, not the ION. Jeez Louise, oi. Tell ya. Natron, select the wrong thing. There we go. Now we want to also change it so that it's center interact for the ION. We're going to put a, oh yes, we're going to offset it first. Let me pull up those. Now, because we've animated this different than in the original one, my numbers here are going to probably be off a little bit, so we may have to play with this. But I currently have it listed at 405 for the vertical. And then here, this is where it's going to probably be off. I have it at 1174. All right. And we can see it is definitely off. And we are also not on frame 121. Let's make sure we're on frame 121. And we can't also be evaluating this with low resolution. I take it back. It is correct because that's right. We set it up to 21. All right, so it's working. This is the correct position. It does give us the correct ending, so we don't have to move it at all here. So what we're going to do is put a transform node on this because obviously we are going to, and we're going to set a key on that on the x-axis because we don't want it to move off to the side, or we don't want to lose this first position. We're going to go back 24 frames to frame 97. We can see it's offset again. And so now this one we're going to have a little bit more trouble evaluating because the T and the A are dominating the left-hand side of the collapsed font in the original. So the only point that we have that's shared between these two that we're going to be able to evaluate is the top of this I think this is, let's see, is the A over here. This A here is going to line up with this A over here. And so we want those two to line up perfectly. So we're going to zoom in. We're going to do this at 200%. We're just going to zoom in 200%, and we're going to pull this over. Let's see what I originally had it set to. I had it set to -514. That's probably, this part might not be correct, but we'll try it. Say -514. And indeed, it does not line up because we can see right here, we can see this arch. When these two are going to be lined up, this bit here is going to disappear. So I think it actually turned out, if I remember correctly, it's going to be 12 minus 512. There we go. So now it's gone. So now I know that the two animations are, or the two pieces are overlapping perfectly. So I can go back to the original text. I can get rid of the ION. Oh, wait a minute. That was apparently not the A. That was the N, not the A. My bad. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We get rid of it, and we just create the NAT, and then we wind up with this. We can see it's of. Oh, actually, that was the O. All right, it's the O. It was one of the letters. We didn't know what it was. All right. We do want to turn off the difference. We want to switch it to over. There we go. All right, we're good to go. The only other thing we need to do is we need to add in our motion for this transform node, because obviously, if we go back here and we set it back to low res and watch our animation, we're going to have the exact same problem we had before, where it sort of slides in because it's not easing properly. So we make sure we have our transform node. Go over to our curves, select that x-axis. Let's fit it, which is weird. It keeps pushing it off to the right, but all we need to do is select this upper point here, and we're going to right-click on it, change the interpolation to horizontal, and that should fix our easing there. Now let's look at our motion, and everything will hopefully look a lot more natural. And it's looking a little funky here. That's a bit odd to me. This wasn't doing this. Let me make sure. No, that should be right. All right, let's turn off this and just make sure that it's not actually doing that in there. I don't worry about the R and the O or the O's and so forth. Let's shrink this down a little bit so that we can actually see it. Let's set it to 100% size. So we see it. There we go. This is going to be a little slow, but we'll be able to see our motion, I hope. And evaluate if this is going to be giving us any undesired stutters. I'm not seeing any stutters on that. Yes. So it's not really stuttering. What we're seeing is it's easing out. It looks like it's slowing down very well. And we might see a little bit of stuttering in the R and the I, but these are middle letters, and because of all the wonky motion that's happening in there, it doesn't look bad. It looks like it's peeling apart, and that's just happens to be how they're moving. Nobody's going to really focus on it. People are going to focus on this side of it, and they're going to focus on this side in the animation most of the time. So if we look at this at a smaller size and we just evaluate this at a much lower resolution, well, you can see it looks pretty good. This O is looking a little jerky here, but I think the reason the O is looking jerky is because, let's see if it actually, you know what, I'm going to just double check it, make sure that that O is not looking jerky in our final animation at actual resolution. The jerkiness was probably from it being a lower resolution. Yeah, I'm not seeing the O looking terrible. No, that O looks perfectly fine. I'm perfectly happy with that. Same with this O. It does go forward and come back, and I think that's what we were seeing is pixel skipping because of the lower resolution. All right, so there we go. So this is our motion of both words. All right. So now we have the words. Now we need to do the outlines. So how are we going to go about doing the outlines? Well, the outlines are actually going to be done in a simple way. What we're going to do is actually cheat. Cheat, you say? What? What? No, Paul Bill, you wouldn't cheat. No, not you. We're actually going to take these two, this whole block of text that we've made, everything here, and we're going to hit Alt-K to clone it. Which is going to create this clone way off in the middle of nowhere. We're going to pull this back. All right, and we're going to put it right over here. And there was a reason that we did this, is because we want to have these two things, you know, near one another. We only want to be able to change, we want to change one attribute for each of these and then merge it all together, the results over one another. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this font, we're going to do a merge node here. And I'm going to merge, actually, I'm going to merge, let's see, I'm going to merge the clone nodes with the original nodes. And the reason we're going to do that is because for the clone nodes, we're going to just be breaking one little thing, okay? We're going to basically just sit here and we're going to say, let me see, think about this. Yes, for the clone nodes, all we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we're going to change it so that the we're going to change the stroke size. See how all the text here for our first cloned node, this is our first clone node. For our first clone node, we our font over here, where is it? Stroke size, right here. Oops, let me make sure that's visible. Stroke size, it's all blacked out. We're going to right click on this and just say unlink from text 1, and we're going to change this up to be, we're going to change it up. You know what? I did it 2 in the original one, and I thought it was a little light looking, so we're going to change it to 4, just to give it a bit of a darker look here. And we can see that it's making it red. Now, we can see it right here. See how it's red right there? Now, we're looking at it red, and you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, Power Bill, that looks a little funky to me. We're going to fix that in a bit, but we're going to fix it in a different place than you might think. We're going to go over here to the second one, and we're going to just do the same thing. We're going to take it, and we're going to go down to each one of these. There's only 4 of them. So all we're going to do is, again, right-click, unlink our stroke size, and we're going to just bring it up to 4. Let's do that for each one of these. Double-click on this one, scroll down, go to our stroke size, right click, unlink, set it to 4, stroke size, scroll down, excuse me, double click on this, go scroll down, go to stroke size, unlink, set this to 4, whoops, not 5, 4, and now we should have both sets of words are outlined in red. So you're saying, oh, that doesn't look right to me. It isn't right. What we're going to do is go back to our originals, and in our originals, if we scroll down, we can see our stroke color is red. Well, because the other ones are derived from this, all we have to do is change the stroke size here from red to white. Well, all we got to do is select this, pick white, hit OK, and then go to the next one, double click, scroll down, pick our color, white, hit OK, and you can see it's white, and you're still saying it's still not looking right, Power Bill. Trust me, we're going to fix it all in just a minute. We're going to scroll down on the third one, set it to white, fourth one, scroll down, set it to white. Now remember, this is a lot easier than doing 2 sets of fonts, you know, or excuse me, 1 text node per letter. This is way easier. We're only doing 4, whereas we'd have to do 12 times 2, so 24 total clone nodes. Oh my goodness, I was just juggling so many nodes. That would be crazy, right? So you're saying to yourself, okay, yeah, did that. Well, it doesn't look like it did anything. You're right, it didn't do anything yet. That's what this magical merge node here is for. We're going to take this merge node and shift it from over to from. We got to find from. There it is. From. When I set it to from, because the merge node is merging on top of, or is being, excuse me, because our original text, our original text is the ones without the outlines. What's happening is that our clones are below it. And so our original text is all eating around it. And so it blends all of that original text in and eats out around it and leaves only the outline that's sitting outside of it. And so we wind up with, yeah, this outline's a little bit, probably a little bit bigger than the outline here. And actually, I really like how it's looking. We're going to keep it at 4. 4 looks really good. All right, so what does this look like when we actually animate it? Well, let's put this at, you know what, we'll just set it at about, I just want to make sure we're going to have it at the right space. Right about there should be good. We'll get it nice and centered so that an N is there. That should unfold properly. So we're going to hit play. And when we watch this, this should hopefully unfold correctly. And we can see that all the text is bled together. And so it looks like this text has, it was all this hodgepodge of letters are sort of unfolding from nothingness. Now, this isn't all we're going to do. We're going to do a couple more, I think 1 or 2 more things at the most. I want to just double check my original. Yes, there's a couple more things we need to do. We'll talk about them in a minute. Because there is something else we didn't do in the previous episode that we're going to want to do to make this look or read a bit better. But we're going to watch this first. We're going to watch this motion first. It's not going to take long. We're almost there. I know, it's slow in real time. But we can see that it unfolds and it looks good. And there we go. And so we can see it. And that is how we unfold the text. All right. And so now it looks like text unfolding and it's all coming out from nowhere. All right. So that's how I did that effect. Or that's how we do that effect. And the only problem is, of course, this is all happening when it's all together at frame 96. Excuse me, we need to get to a point where let's just set it to frame 96. Just type in 96 here, and there we go. We're at frame 90. Whoops, not 9601. What the heck is that? Frame 96. There we go. So frame 96, we have it all blended. That's where, I think it was 96, wasn't it? Or was it 97? Oh, bother. We need to get one of our transformers. There we go. Oh, sorry, at 97, frame 97. Frame 97. All right, so what we need to do, what we want to do is we don't want, prior to frame 97, this text to really exist. So what we're going to do is we're going to reveal this over time. These fonts on the side of it, and we're actually going to start it slightly before they start peeling apart, because if we don't do it beforehand, we'll lose that effect. So let me get my original one and pull it up. We might have to go back in time a little bit. Let me go to the, whoops, I'm not seeing, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong node. There we go. So I did it on frame of all frames. We're going to go back to the beginning to frame 95. So on frame 95, what we're going to do is on this merge node here, we're going to take the mix and this is the merge node where it's merging with the font, or with the logo, excuse me. And we're going to just set this to 0. Okay, so it's gone. So we're going to set a keyframe here. And then I think I only moved it up to frame 105. So we're going to, which is 10 frames ahead. We'll just take 105, which is 10 frames, which is just after it starts to peel apart. We're going to have it fade to back up to 1. So this is the point where it's going to be, it's going to come together. So let's watch how that fades into existence. If we watch this, we can see it starts to fade in, and then just enough so that we can see it start pulling apart. And once we add the blue, because this is a blue laser kind of effect, that slight pause at the beginning where it's not moving is actually going to be very, very subtle. And it we can see, actually, right here, we can see exactly, it's barely noticeable like this. It just looks like it gives us enough information so that it looks like it comes into existence just as it starts to pull apart. All right, and that's basically 3 frames before and then a few frames afterwards. All right, so that takes care of the actual animation. Now, here's the thing. We just did this whole animation or all the animation of the text using the text node, and we did a whole bunch of stuff not using transform nodes. And one of the big problems we run into with this is that in my actual animation, I had done motion blur. And the motion blur is not showing up in this. So what we actually want to do is to enable motion blur. How would we go about motion blurring? Well, for the transform nodes, for all these transform nodes, all we have to do is enable a little bit of motion blur. It's already the presets for motion blur for every transform node are 180 degree, which is 0.5 shutter. So all we'd have to do is just enable, motion blur on the node, and we'd go through each one and give it just up it to 0.1 or 1, depending on how long you want to wait for your motion blur to render. I usually don't use a very high number because I don't think of motion blur as being, I don't mind it looking a little dotted while it's moving and so forth. But, the higher your number, the longer it will take for your motion blur to render. But you'll get more bits, you'll get more dots and so forth, and it will probably look a bit more clean. So I wouldn't set it much more than 1, but we could set it to something like 1, and it would give us motion blur on something. Well, the problem is of course, we can't do motion blur on our text nodes when we're using a linear, when we're doing letter spacing. We can't do it by default because letter spacing doesn't have motion blur. The text node has no motion blur. So any motion that's done in this whole area that is not done by the transform nodes is going to suffer from the fact that we don't actually have motion blur. So this is one of those times where it pays to use a second node. So right here, what we're going to do is we're going to just, after this node, this whole thing, we're going to hit tab and we're going to type in time blur. We're going to put a time blur node in there. And what this is going to allow us to do is this time blur node, all you have to do to disable it if you don't want this is we're going to just give it a second because it's actually time blurring this whole thing. Which is going to take it a minute to figure out because it's doing it. But we can see that it's set to divisions 10. I think that's all I actually did. We don't actually have to do anything more than that. If we go back here to a point somewhere in the middle where it's actually peeling apart, so let's say about here, if we watch this, we might see some of that actual motion blur happen at the midpoint. So it's going to build this up. Now, we can't do frame holds on this stuff because, we could, well, I suppose, no, we can't. I wouldn't recommend caching. No. We're doing complete animation. So we really can't save any time on this with the construction of that. That's the other problem with this type of thing, is when you're dealing with fonts that are all animated and so forth, you can't really do a disk cache to hold a single frame. But here we go. We can see now we get motion blur in here thanks to this frame blend of that Natron spreading apart at the end. And it's not really, you know what? The more I'm thinking about this, the more I'm actually thinking we may actually do better. Instead of doing this time blur here, let's do it. I'm going to change this a little bit. I think we might wind up with a better result if we put that time blur node after our transform and just let it handle all the motion blur for the entire logo, for the whole animation. It's not going to take all that much longer to render, I don't think, than if we just did motion blur normally. There we go. And there we go. Now we're getting a nice motion blur motion going on here. Look at that. That's looking just dandy. And you can see it changed the motion of the animation just a smidge, because this is going this way, this is going this way, and it's evaluating it after this point, so it actually looks better. I think we're going to wind up with a much better animation. So there we go. That's actually, I was looking at my original one, going, yeah, it's not looking as good as doing it by hand. So that's the way we can get the motion blur. And anyway, if you don't want no motion blur, all you got to do to disable it is to disable that node. And there we go. And that will give us a motion blur for our entire animation. And that should just about cover us. So that if we go back to the end and were to look at this, let's just look at this. And we're going to want to reset our first and last frames for the animation. But let's just look at what this looks like at this point. Actually, let's look at it after, well, let's look at it as partially unfolded like it is. And see it with all the colors in place. This isn't going to look perfect because we're not at 100%, but I don't want to zoom in too much. We can sort of get the sense. So this is where that radial that we did that gives it darker letters, it drops down to 80% on the edge, which is still visible. We can see that we still have visibility over here. Actually, it was dropped it down. Wait a minute. It was actually here. We dropped it down. It's actually, we're mixing it in only, we've dropped it down to 80% of its value. So, so this is 80% of its value, which darkens the edges a little bit, but we can see it really emphasizes this center section. And when we get to the end, when we get past, basically, if we get out here to 124, 125 area, with all the text is unfolded, we'll see that we have this nice dark edge and it has a nice hot spot in the middle, and then we winds up with dark edges around the Natron logo and at the edges of the fonts and at the top and the bottom of the font. See, we wind up with it's a much, in my opinion, it just makes the logo a whole lot more interesting, a lot more, you know, it looks cooler. It also draws attention away from the logo itself, which originally was in the center, and it basically focuses us right smack dab in the middle of the Natron Nation. And as long as that's in the center of our frame, which it looks pretty darn close to the exact center of our frame, we should wind up with a good looking animation at the end. And I think that's it. Excuse me again. So, right, so today's goal was this, which isn't playing back the smoothest. We'll watch it one more time. Excuse me. All right. And so, thanks for watching and keep on Natroning.